Hey YouTube, we're back here for part 2 of this fish tank cleaning and resealing. Now, one of the things that can be your best friend when you're doing something like cleaning a tank, and even when you're doing something like taking the caulking out of the corners of the tank, is a one-edge razor blade, because I've got a lot of scale on the outside of this tank where water obviously was getting outside, and you don't want to dig it in so much that it scratches the glass, because eventually if you keep digging at it, it will. But if you get a nice edge going where you're taking off whatever the offending scale or whatever it happens to be on the outside of the tank, then you can do a lot of damage to the scale in and on a tank with just a razor blade alone. Now, it's kind of rough on your arms. If you're not used to doing it, be careful. You can roll the razor blade into your fingers. Trying to use gloves is kind of going backwards, because while the glove might well protect your fingers from the edge of the razor blade, it's going to cause you to be a lot more clumsy with the razor blade itself. So basically, I've cleaned a great deal of the scale off of the outside of the tank just by taking a straight edge razor blade and going back and forth, or getting behind where I can see the scale is, and just at maybe a 30-degree angle against the glass, you just run that sharp edge of that razor blade along there, and it will do a great deal of good. Once again, be very careful with a sharp razor blade like that. It can do a lot of damage. Okay, so time is beginning to run out on me here. Peru is coming up, and I need this tank to be ready for when I get back so that I can keep fish in it, which gives me about a month, which isn't a great deal of time, but it is enough time for me to try. Okay, I'm laying this tank down on its side. Probably better adjust the camera a little bit so that you can kind of see what I'm doing. I have this Barkeep's Friend once again that I am going to be using as my main attack. Boy, that angle is just really bad. It just doesn't show anything except for the piece of the tank itself. Okay, so there is a lot of old scale, and I'm going to take a rag and try to knock off as much of the rough scale. A lot of this is on the top of the aquarium itself. This aquarium does have a brace bar on the top, in the middle, but I'm going to try to get as much of this rough stuff off as I can before I actually start trying to clean. I put some plastic down, hopefully to save a great deal of my plywood from getting too wet, but my back is so bad that I can't really do the bending over to the ground thing much anymore, so I'm going to try to get away using it up on my super tall sawhorses that I've made for myself so that I don't have to bend over quite so much. But I need to get the worst of this stuff off and out of here so that I can start trying to attack this. Now, one thing that I have learned, much to my surprise, after buying and setting up and beginning to use regularly an RO unit, is that most of this scale in this tank any that I don't get by doing this cleaning will end up coming off if I use RO water in the tank. The RO water itself will dissolve the scale and eventually it will disappear. I found that out in my 110, which I tried to set up and clean as much as I could, but I was using remineralizing RO water to start out with, and I was fairly stunned at how quickly just straight RO water took off the worst of the scale. Alright, so I'm getting it down where it's clean enough principally for me to start trying to do some actual cleaning work here. I might be able to show you this razor blade again on this side. Get all the dirt and garbage off of it so that you can actually see the inside of the tank and watch my motions with the razor blade, just like a 30-degree angle. That's straight razor, one edge razor. And I'm just doing this as a preliminary to get the worst of it off, or to get it started coming off. And I think you can actually see that pretty well, but just using this razor blade gets a great deal of it off of there. And this is pure scale. I mean, there's obviously something else in it, but it's pretty much just pure scale. If I get the right angle and I get underneath the scale, eventually I can cause the scale to start coming off in a nice even stroke. Now you could use a holder that would help you hold the razor blade, where you wouldn't have to worry about it popping back and getting your finger if it gets away from you. Obviously some of this scale is not going to come off with just a razor blade alone. It's in there so solidly. But I'm here to tell you that razor blade will save you a lot of scrubbing and work. Just be careful with it. Don't let it get you. It's not worth bleeding out over. Looks like there's a bunch on the front side too. I'm not sure how much of it I can get. Now, you can see how that scale's coming off. It's not very well in focus, but I can't really get it focused very well. I may have to restart this video. Looks like my battery's running low. So I'm going to shut it down now and get back with you in a little bit. Alright, I switched to the 60, my little 60 macro. It seems to do a little better job of giving you a wider picture of what's going on. Let's see if I can flip it around here so I can see what's going on too. Alright, you get a little better picture of the basically right now you're watching me scrape with a razor blade, but in a second here I'm going to go ahead and start putting on some of the barkeep screen to see how it's going to work, to see if it's going to help with scale like is up here. But you can see this whole section where the scale is so thick that I can't even, and so well stuck that I can't even get on it with a razor blade. That'll probably give us a good place to watch to see how it does. And you can go ahead and do the whole tank with the razor blade, and it will at least speed up the process. You can probably dull your blade out if it's as dirty as this one is. But at least it would speed the process up to the point where you were actually getting the worst of the scale off of there. And I've got quite a bit of scale in this tank. Okay, so to do this, I have picked myself a couple of weapons of choice. Of course, I've got a rag, and I've also got a real bristly scrubby. Of course, it's not metal, it's just little fibers that I hope will not scratch. It's like a scouring pad, basically. If you buy one of these, you just want to make sure it doesn't have any chemicals in it. You don't want to buy something that's treated with some kind of chemical or something, because then you're adding that chemical to your tank, and this will just give us a better shot at getting some of this garbage off the tank before we start the actual cleaning process. And when we're cleaning, it'll be a bit of a scrubber to use. And basically, I've just got myself a 5-gallon bucket with some clean, hot, warm water. And I'm going to go ahead and start putting some of this chemical on. Once again, I had never used a chemical like this before on a project like this. I've always been way more fond of using vinegar, or like I say, RO water. But I'm going to give this a shot this time, because this one's so built up and my shoulders are so bad that I just don't really want to scrub and scrape every square inch of this tank. Alright, so I'm just going to first pull the seal, because it's not going to come out of there if I don't. I'm going to put a thin layer of it on the outside of the top of the tank, and then I'm going to get my scrub rag wet, and I'm going to spread it around on the top of this tank to try to get the product spread out over the areas that need to be cleaned, so that it can start breaking down the scale that's in the... And of course, once I finish doing this to this tank, I'm going to have to wash it out many, many, many times to satisfy myself that I am not allowing any poisons into my tank that are going to kill my rare fish from Peru. That's one of the things that's on my mind about doing this. I just don't know. Alright, now it says to not let the product literally dry, so I'm going to rinse this out. First I'm going to scrub it a little bit. Anytime when you're scrubbing and you hear sounds like scraping, it probably means that there's actually something on the glass itself that you are scrubbing into when you're scrubbing. If it's perfectly silent going across the top of the glass, then it's probably pretty clean. And this is the outside, the back of the tank, so it probably got some splash over from I'm going to use the rag rinsed out and try to pull the product back off of the glass. Now this is a rough approximation. It's not actually really doing the job yet, but we can see that the glass is a great deal cleaner. And I will give you another look at it as I use it on the outside of this. See how that works out. And this is going to be a messy project. There's just no two ways around it. You're dealing with a very old tank that needs to be really cleaned and really resealed. So it's going to take some elbow grease to get it into a position where it can actually be functional for fish again. This is the tank that I was going to set up as my wife's. Let's see. Looks like that's getting to be 11 minutes. This 55-gallon was going to be my wife's tank, but I found a 75 on sale, and instead of using this tank, which I knew probably was going to be rough, instead of using that tank for her, I went ahead and bought that 75 for Christmas several years ago, and that is now her tank. And I'm glad I did. One, this gives me this tank to use later on. Well, on the worst of this scale, it does not seem to be penetrating it very well. I may just be stuck with elbow grease here. I'd like to let it sit on there a little while. To give it a chance to really try to break that stuff up. Go ahead and slather it on the whole side here. It seems to be cleaning the light stuff, the dirt, just the use of the tank stuff. Seems to be coming off pretty readily with it. Of course, it'd probably come off with a wet rag too, so who knows. But the heavy scale, it does not seem to be cutting. I think it was Joseph from Fish Fam News, JH Aquatics, that told me it didn't work for him. So I may be learning a lesson here that it doesn't really do all that much. But I'm going to give it the old college try and see if I can get it to work. Let's see if it's loosened it up enough for my razor blade to work a little better. Well, it's loosened it up on the edges. it's not really going to help us. I may just be down to putting RO water in this tank and letting it eat it away again like I did with the 110 gallon. But it just may not cut this heavy a scale. Now, a lot of you have seen my my propensity to use the output of a canister filter to splash water on the front plate of the glass to create a certain circular water flow in a tank. I've always preferred doing that. But this is one of the downsides of doing that. If you live in an area with heavy calcium in the water, the water will deposit calcium on the glass, as you see here. And that's what this is from. Because once again, I had an output spraying straight across to this corner from the back. Now this tank is going to go through several cleanings because obviously it's got to be completely broken down and the seams pulled and re-seamed again. I'm not going to, hopefully, knock on wood, I'm not going to completely disassemble this tank and then have to put it completely back together again. And when you're breaking off the old caulking in one of these, you have two pieces of glass. One goes all the way over the top of the piece of glass and the bottom. So when you are digging in from the bottom up, you don't want to dig into that seam. There is a seal running down this edge of the glass where one piece of glass fits over another that holds the two pieces of glass together. You don't want to get rid of that. So in this case, it would be along the top. Along the top, you don't want to dig in so far that you break that seal between those two pieces of glass. You want to leave that in place. So you've got to be kind of careful when you're doing it, because if you break that seal completely, the tank will just fall apart. There's nothing holding it together anymore. So you don't want to do that. That would be a mistake. Oh, my back. So yeah, it looks like this scale is not going to break loose in the heavy places here for me. So, I mean, we're getting better. It's obviously taking some off. But in a place where the scale is really heavy, like it is in this tank, it's obviously not going to cut through that. I don't know, if I had a buffer wheel going, I might be able to use this stuff and pour the stuff onto a buffer wheel and use it to spin and eat that up a little bit. I've got a Dremel tool over there. I'm kind of loath to try that though, because I don't want to score or damage the glass in any way. I suppose I could try it. Let's see. Buffer wheel. Buffer wheel. Buffer pads. I don't know how that will act. Yeah, I'm going to scratch that idea. That doesn't sound like productive use of a Dremel tool. Now, could use a stiff wire bristle. All right, I'll be right back. Well, as you can see, although it's not in focus very well, I've broken down and gotten out a power tool. And while I don't recommend a wire brush for a fish tank glass, I'm going to give this a shot and see if I can get it to focus a little bit. Maybe you can see that. So I'm going to take this wire brush and use it to rough up this scale. And I'm getting a good deal of the cleaner on it. So let's see what it looks like when it's actually in work on this scale on the side where you can see it. It's definitely cutting it. Put a little water on it. Yeah, it's definitely pulling some of it off. Keep this stuff liquid. Once again, this can, of course, scar the glass itself, but it seems to be, until it gets loaded up, actually pulling quite a bit of the scale off. So I may continue in this vein a little while and see how much effect I can have. If the solution itself keeps loosening the scale and I keep hitting it with the, maybe use a razor blade again. But once again, if you're going to use a power tool, I recommend that you be very careful, because if you put too much pressure on the tool, you could very well scratch your glass. Now, on the side of a tank like this, it's probably not as critical. And once again, when you're using a razor, straight razor, or a one-sided razor blade with a wet surface that you're working on, please be careful. I don't want you to cut a finger off and then come blame me because you saw it in my video. I'm not interested in hurting people. And you can get hurt if you're not careful. But I think we can see that it is beginning to cut through all of the heavy parts of this scale by using that steel brush wheel. And so I'm going to continue a little bit with that. You don't want to jab too hard or push too hard, because you could very easily lose your grip on the drill and break the tank. But man, that sure does make it a lot easier on my old frozen shoulders. And I'm getting a lot of gray water off of here. Now this is a really tight wire brush. It's not one that has a lot of long outreaching spines or wire bristles hanging off of it, so it's actually pretty conducive to what I'm trying to do here. Basically, I'm dividing and conquering here. If I can get it down into small little places, then I can use my razor blade more effectively. And I would definitely recommend, after you've been using it a while, to flip the razor blade over and let it work from a different direction, because it might be sharper. That's one thing, if you've ever done construction work and had to use one of these razor blades, that you learn pretty quickly, is that they will get dull on a side, so sometimes you have to flip them over and use the other side. I've got this drill turned down to its lowest speed, so I'm not trying to burn it off of there. I'm trying to just slowly get underneath it and break it up. And as you can see, we're nearly clean on this side. So while the Barkeep's Friend alone is not doing such a great job, I think in conjunction with a razor blade and a power tool, that it's actually doing exactly what I want it to do. I'm not sure going out and buying a power tool would be worth it to you if you don't already have one, but most of us men have a desire for power tools anyway. So if it's around Christmas or birthday, you might buy the man in your life a power tool, drill, setup of some sort, and then surreptitiously use it on your own. Now, I'm not trying trying to give anybody any ideas there. I'm just saying. All right. I'm going to go ahead and keep doing this and get it down to a point where I feel like I can call myself good and clean the other side, and I'll get back with you then. All right. This thing has been scrubbed several times, and I have not rinsed it out yet, but I'm going to let it dry completely before I rinse it out. And I've had time to consider the piece of furniture that I wanted to build to house these tanks, but I've begun to realize, one, that even though it would be very good insulation, it's going to be so heavy I may not be able to carry it in the house myself. And two, that I probably don't have the time to actually do as much a piece of furniture as I want to before I have to have this thing set up and running and waiting for fish to come home from Peru with me. Hopefully the fish will be shipped with Corey and Dean. When they get their shipment, they'll get mine as well. I think we've got that worked out. I don't know for sure, but it seems like that's what's going to happen. And they'll probably have to stay there for a while, probably go through the meds and the quarantine, and then get in good enough shape where they can be shipped to me and survive. All right, guys, I'll get back with you with part 3 after I've rinsed this tank down and started peeling the caulking out of the corners, and I'm ready to recaulk. Good luck.